So, in the wake of George Floyd's death, Black Lives Matter, the organization, not talking about the idea, I'm talking about the organization, raised billions of dollars. Billions. That is billions with a B, not millions with an M, billions with a B, because it became a virtue signal for everyone and their mother to make a big deal about donating to the organization, to have businesses encourage their employees to donate to the organization. It was all over the place. And in fact, it was almost made to feel that if you weren't giving money to Black Lives Matter, the organization, if you wanted to say, like I did, donate directly to Black business owners who had their businesses destroyed in the looting and the riots, especially in Minneapolis. I donated to a couple of businesses in Minneapolis. That just wasn't good enough. Nothing was good enough unless you donated to Black Lives Matter, the organization. Now, when everyone was making those donations, no one seemed to really care about what those donations were going to be used for. And in fact, we still really don't know to this day what the organization is doing with that money, except that there are numerous stories out there about Black Lives Matter developing curriculum for schools and actually getting it into the schools for kids as young as 5. I mean, we're not talking about high school curriculum here exclusively, folks. We're talking about elementary, middle, and high school curriculum. And of course, they're already in the colleges. They were already there already. But that was one of the things that they did, is they were developing this new woke anti-racist curriculum and getting it into the school system. So they had another avenue to, frankly, indoctrinate people from a really young age. And that, to me, is actually one of the most terrifying developments of this whole woke movement, is the infiltration of the school systems, because most people can't homeschool. And so the only option they really have is the public school system, who they are trusting to educate their children. Well, if you don't know what your children are learning in school, now is the absolute best time to find out, because you can look right over their shoulder into their Zoom and you can find out what they're learning. And it is critical. I cannot emphasize this enough. It is critical that you understand what they are learning, because it is not the same thing that you learned when you were in school. Well, recently, Megyn Kelly found out exactly what her kids were learning in school, and she was so perturbed by it that she ended up yanking them out of the school entirely and is now leaving New York City altogether. So we're going to read this story about Megyn Kelly's decision to pull her kids out of the NYC schools because they were calling to reform white children, and her decision to leave the big city altogether. But before we get into that, folks, I have to ask for your help, because YouTube, every single night for weeks, for many creators, not just me, has been dumping subscribes to our channels, couple hundred at a time, overnight, every single week. This has happened to me very, very consistently. Yesterday, I was live with Joshua on my channel. We do our regular Tuesday night show at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time, and it was actually a really great show. It was one of our best attended shows that we've done so far. We were pretty pleased about it. I look at my statistics after we got off the air, and I had lost over 100 subscribers to the channel. Now, not everyone likes Joshua. That's not everyone's cup of tea, and I understand that. But it is not at all consistent for me to lose over 100 subscribers to the channel when we have one of our best watched shows of the entire time we've been doing it. That is completely inconsistent. We've been doing these shows every single week for months. We never lose that many subscribers in one sitting. This was another instance of YouTube dumping hundreds of subscribers from my channel, which they have done every single night since Election Day. So that is a long-winded way of saying that if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing to the channel, or just doing a quick double check to make sure you are still subscribed. I do daily content around news, politics, culture, really whatever I find interesting. And if that's something you want to receive, make sure you subscribe, turn on those notifications. And if you really want to help me out, share the video out to your friends and family. Get them to come subscribe to me too, because YouTube's gonna YouTube, man. It's all I can do. All right, let's read this article about Megyn Kelly from The Blaze. Veteran news journalist and media maven, Megyn Kelly has pulled her children out of their New York City school and plans to leave the city behind altogether. Kelly announced the decision after learning that her kids' school promoted the reform of white children in racially biased practices. Kelly did not reveal the name of the school her children previously attended. During Monday's broadcast of her podcast, The Megyn Kelly Show, Kelly said that she received a letter from the administrators of her two young sons' schools that detailed a plan to implement an extreme racial social justice agenda in the schools. It's so out of control on so many levels, and after years of resisting it, we're going to leave the city, Kelly admitted. We pulled our boys from their school, and our daughter is going to be leaving hers soon, too. The schools have always been far left, which doesn't align with my own ideology, but I didn't really care. Most of my friends are liberals. It's fine. I come from Democrats as a family. Kelly added, however, that the final straw was when she found out that the administration was peddling concerning sentiments about how white children are left unchecked and unbothered in their schools, homes, and communities. And of course, that aligns with the concept of white fragility, which we've been over and over and over again on this channel. The whole idea of being unbothered. What they're going to say is that these kids are going to grow up into be fragile adults who can't admit their own white privilege because they were never challenged to in schools. Well, white fragility, just as a reminder, folks, there's absolutely zero academic evidence to back up the concept that white fragility is even a real thing. And even in Robin DiAngelo's book, she provides zero evidence of her assertions of white fragility being a real thing. Don't believe me? There are 2 chapters in her book in which she has zero academic sources. So go check it out for yourself. I'm not making this stuff up. This is right along with the Grievance Studies project that James Lindsay, Helen Pluckrose, Peter Boghossian did, where they literally made up papers, got them published in peer-reviewed journals, because these are not academically rigorous fields of study. They make stuff up all the time and then present it as truth, and you feel so bad and so guilty as a white person reading it that you don't even bother to look and see the evidence behind it because it doesn't exist. Let's keep going. I'm not offended at all by the ideology, and I lean center-left on some things, but they've gone around the bend. I mean, I kind of felt the same way when I left the left. It was like, I still consider myself to be a liberal. I still consider myself to be a pretty centrist person. I do actually lean left on some issues. I lean right on some issues as well. That's always been true. But to see how far the left pushes it over and over and over again, I mean, there's just no way that you can be a part of that. I mean, they have gone off the deep end. This summer, in the wake of George Floyd, they circulated amongst the diversity group, which includes white parents like us. There are people who want to be allies and stay attuned to what we can do. An article, and afterwards they recirculated it and wanted every member of the faculty to read it. Kelly recalled that the article asserted that white children are inherently racist. So the whole idea behind white children being inherently racist is that they're just socialized to be racist. We cannot expect white people in the way that they're socialized to actually look out for the needs of anyone who isn't white. I mean, and that's of course is absurd, but that is the idea, that is the philosophy behind the idea of white fragility, is that white people are only going to look out for white people and they can't be bothered with anyone else, which of course is not true. It is not true at all in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it is an incredibly racist ideology to push, but here we are, such as it is. According to Kelly, a portion of the article, which appears to have been written by Nyla Weber, executive director of Orland's Public Education Network in June, said, "There is a cop killer sitting in every school where white children learn." Isn't that nice? They gleefully soak in their whitewashed history that downplays the Holocaust of indigenous peoples and Africans in the Americas. Now, I remember back to when I learned history in school, and I learned both of those things. I learned that the colonists who came to America absolutely killed off the Indians, and it wasn't a good thing. And we all learned about slavery as well, and we had to watch movies about slavery, and I read like Frederick Douglass's books and stuff like that. I mean, this was all stuff that was taught. Now, maybe it wasn't taught in exactly the way they wanted. Maybe there are different books you could read. Maybe there are different historical sources you can look to. I can accept that, man. People should absolutely learn different perspectives in history. This is why I always encourage everyone. Listen, I know this is kind of a classic book that usually turns people on to this stuff, but everyone really should read People's History of the United States. It is important to understand these different perspectives, even regardless of whether you agree with the author and his position and all this stuff. It is important to understand these perspectives because, you know, like, let's just face it, white people have not always been like the perfect saviors of humanity. And God knows I would never say that they were. But does that mean that every white person is fundamentally racist? No, there is no evidence to back that up. And saying that they are is ridiculous. Let's see. They gleefully they happily believe their all-white spaces exist as a matter of personal effort and willingly use violence against black bodies to keep those spaces white. As black bodies drop like flies, it is absurd to me that these people refer to themselves as bodies. Is there any less of like any more of a dehumanizing perspective that you could have on the world than to refer to yourself as a body? I am not a body. After I die, there is going to be a body, but I am not my body. I am the spirit within my body. That is exactly how it is. That's why when we die, we leave our body behind. Your body is not the sum total part of you, man. As black bodies drop like flies around us by violence at white hands, of course, only at white hands, and never at any other color hands, okay? How can we in any of our minds conclude that whites are all right? This is an article from her kid's school. White children are left unchecked and unbothered in their schools, homes, and communities to join and advance and protect systems that take away black life. I am tired of white people reveling in their state-sanctioned depravity, snuffing out black life with no consequences. That's absurd. These people are educating your children. Really let that sink in for a second. These people that wrote this article are educating your children. Yeah. The article continued, where's the urgency for school reform for white kids being indoctrinated in Black Death and protected from the consequences? Where are the government-sponsored reports looking into how white mothers are raising culturally deprived children who think Black Death is okay? Where are the national conferences, white papers, and policy positions on the pathology of whiteness in schools, the article said. This time, if you really want to make a difference in Black lives and not have to protest this S again, go reform white kids, because that's where the problem is, with white children being raised from infancy to violate Black bodies with no remorse or accountability. A portion of Kelly's podcast appeared on Twitter on Monday, captioned, "After years of resisting it, we're going to leave." Megyn Kelly describes why she pulled her kids out of schools, and she, Glenn Lowry, and Coldix Man Hughes describe how woke leftism has taken over the schools. And guys, I will actually link this article in the description below so you can go and listen to that podcast. I'm going to go listen to the full podcast. I think Megyn Kelly's pretty awesome. I think that she's a strong woman, and good for her for realizing that her kids should not be in that school and making the decision to pull them out of it and frankly leave New York City entirely. I have no idea why anyone would want to live in New York City at this point. I really don't. New York City has sucked always. Like, it's a dirty city. It's never been a good place, at least for me. I have never, ever enjoyed visiting New York City. I thank God I almost went to NYU for college. I thank God every day I did not make that decision, because it's just like, I didn't want to live in New York before. New York City now is crazy. It is like deserted. Everyone is abandoning the city. They're not going to be able the money to operate. Bill de Blasio is encouraging progressives to come out in the middle of the streets. Well, at the same time, did you see this the other day? At the same time, they're sending the police with binoculars outside of the homes of Jews in New York City to look into the windows, become basically peeping Toms to assess if the Jews have too many people in their house, if they have friends over. Well, progressives are out celebrating in the streets and doing whatever they want, and Black Lives Matter can do whatever they want, but God forbid the Jews have people over to their house. This is literally going on in New York City. It's right now. Like, if you live in a city, man, get the F out. Like, I love not living in a city. It's the best. And I wouldn't change it for the world. All right, guys, that's all I've got for right now. If you enjoyed this video, again, please consider subscribing to the channel. You can also always find all my videos ad-free on my Locals community. The information to join my Locals is right below me, right down there. It's also in the description as well. Locals is free to join to get all my ad-free videos. I don't want to hear any whining about the amount of ads in the videos on YouTube. I don't control that, but I do control Locals, in which there are no ads on the videos ever. So there's your option. That's all I've got for right now. I'll see you soon.